The last thing I'd like to talk about is our overall goals for what we do. Probably one of the most important things to us is that students are in the correct placements. And when we talk about placement, usually we're talking about math. Math is a course at ASD that our students achieve at a very high rate, but we have a very clear understanding of what we need students to understand and know when they leave a class. And so the big question really is placement when you get to the high school and placement for algebra in 8th grade. What I need you to understand as a parent community is that we have a very well-defined set of criteria that we use for placement. And there's really not a lot of room in our placement process for what a student or a parent wants, per se. I put wants in quotation marks. It's really what a student is capable of doing based on the data that we have in front of us. We use 3 pieces of data to place students. The first and foremost is the current classroom academic achievement. That's their grades and their learning habits of the classroom that they're in. If a student is in Math 7 and they simply are not engaged in class and they're not really working hard, and it's reflected in the grade and it's reflected in their learning habits, we're not inclined as a school to assume that because we place them in algebra that they will then begin to work. It's the current classroom performance is based on how they're performing right now, and what do we observe in their work habits, and what do we observe in their achievement. The second tool that we use is we use our MAP assessment. Our students perform very well on MAP, and the measures of academic progress is the second tool that we use because what we look for is we look for agreement in the measures of academic progress score that they receive, where it places them in national percentile rankings, and then does that agree with what they are doing in the classroom here at ASD. Because it's possible that a student is performing really well on the MAP, but day in and day out in class, they're really not applying themselves. In that case, we look to a third piece of data, and it's the third one that I mentioned earlier, and that is we will give an end-of-course standards-based assessment. So if I can create a scenario for you, we have a student who performs really well on MAP tests, probably beyond where their peers are, but in the regular classroom environment, they're not performing as well. Perhaps they don't do their work, perhaps they don't do well on tests, perhaps there's some work habit problems. And so what we will look at is we will look at a third piece of data, which is at the end of the day, at the end of the year, at the end of the course, how do they perform on a standards-based assessment? Can they do the things that we've been working on as a class? And we have students who do not perform really high day to day in class, but ultimately when they sit down to do a standards-based assessment, they really can do the work. What we look for is we look for the greatest degree of agreement in those 3 measures: their current classroom performance, their MAPS assessment, and the performance on the standards-based assessment at the end. This brings us to the second point, which what we're looking for is we're looking for data-informed placement. What I will say to a teacher, if a teacher tells me, well, I really think that a student can do algebra, I will say, what does the data suggest? What is their MAP score? How did they do on a standards-based assessment? How are they doing day in and day out in class? Are they performing at a high level? Do they put forth their best effort? So we will look for data to inform where we place students. The third thing that I want to note in our goals, particularly with math, is that we're standards-based in our instruction. And it's not so much anymore just memorizing facts and regurgitating those. We really are basing our instruction on standards which spell out what students should know, which is more of your memory and recall, but also what they should be able to do and what they can understand. And in math in particular, this is where we probably have the greatest degree of understanding of what students really ought to be able to do. And so the last point that I'll make in this is that we are placing students based on achievement. Now, it's not achievement in the form of high grades. It's not achievement in the form of maps. It's not achievement in the form of that standards-based assessment. It's achievement based on all of those put together, and we look for agreement in those. And if we don't find agreement, that's usually something that we talk about with the families. So you can look forward to hearing that. In fact, probably most of you have already heard from math teachers, particularly 7th grade students going to 8th grade. You'll be hearing very soon. 8th grade parents have already heard from our teachers about high school recommendations. But you can look for that coming from teachers in the next month or so. Lastly, you can email me at slever@asd.edu.qa if you have any questions. I also want to remind you that we will present live here at ASD on March 7th, 2011. I want to thank you for listening. Give yourself a pat on the back if at this point I just said thank you for listening and you in fact still are listening. This really has not been an easy thing for me to sit here and talk to a computer screen, so I hope that this is coherent. If not, don't be afraid to give me some feedback at my email address listed there. And if you need additional questions answered, don't hesitate to contact us. And again, we will do our live presentation March 7th in the ASD presentation room. Thank you very, very much.